And welcome to the show, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Frank Tomaino is our guest. Frank, of course, the longtime writer at the Observer-Dispatch, and he continues on at the OD, and he writes his weekly history column, which is a big staple of the OD and a very well-read part of the OD. And the column for the history started when, Frank?
Well, frankly speaking, which was 80% history, 51 years, 1968.
Whose idea was that?
Tony Vella's was for the Frankly Speaking column. But then in 1985 or 86, the morning paper, the Daily Press, merged with the OD, the afternoon paper, and we worked for the afternoon paper.
Right.
And they were trying to, and the Sunday paper would be called the Observer-Dispatch. So they were thinking for, new items for the new Sunday OD. And I came up with the idea because I actually stole it from the Binghamton paper. It wasn't exactly like mine because I go back so many years. And I made a suggestion, and they said, fine. So it ran from 86 to then in 90 or 91, I retired, and Audrey Lewis did it for a while, and she did a good job. But then they asked me to come back, and I've been doing it ever since, and love every minute of it.
Yeah. The Tony Vella being the late Tony Vella, managing editor of the OD for lots of years. The items that you get in there, Frank, a lot of research.
Well, yeah, every week I'm reading the old newspapers. I go back 150 years, 100, 75, 50, 25, and 10. And each week you have to read the papers. The most difficult thing is picking the ones to use. I like to use names a lot. I think that's one of the things the column is popular. People like to see their names, or many times I'll get an email, gee, my grandfather's name was mentioned in that paper, in your column. But every week I'm either at the library or at the OD reading the old newspapers on microfilm. And it does take a lot of research, but again, I really enjoy it. You start reading those papers. I mean, you go back 150 years, you're in 1869. And of course, during the Civil War in the 60s, there was so much there.
Yeah.
But 1869, they had some of the problems then that we have now. In 1869, they were complaining that the streets weren't plowed in Utica. You figure, what?
Yeah.
But I guess horse and buggies or sleighs needed, somehow the streets had to be clean. But some of the same problems, always complaining about high taxes. Taxpayers would get angry, and the same problem. So it's interesting. And when you start reading the 1920s, I'm a big New York Yankee fan, and you start reading about Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. Great stories. So sometimes I'm there 2-3 hours where just reading those old stories and loving it.
You took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say it's almost addicting when you get into, and I remember when I used to do a lot more of that than I do now, but you'd get into those old newspapers and you're looking for one thing perhaps, but boy, you look and all of a sudden a couple hours have gone by.
It's almost impossible just to, if you find the item, and then go and just, you start looking at everything else. And again, in my column, 75 years, I'm in 1944, towards the end of World War II. Very interesting, what was happening in both Europe and in the Pacific. And like right now, not looking forward to it, but late 1944, December, was the Battle of the Bulge. So it's going to be interesting. And one of the things that reading those 1943-44 papers, how many local boys were killed in action? Every day, without exception, every day. And of course, the Utica OD parish, what would they call parish, involved Herkimer County, Madison County, and Shenango, Lewis. Every day, 7, 8, 9 killed, dozens wounded. Every day. Wow. How we survived, boy.
Frank, do you remember, I know you remember this, but maybe you might know what happened to it. There used to be big, almost like a billboard at Chancellor Park.
Oh, sure, yeah, that was Italian Americans serving in World War II. It went up in 1944 while the war was still going on, and they would add names. And they were alphabetical order, a huge honor roll. And I remember as a kid, walking by, because I had relatives, I had uncles and cousins in the service, and you walk by and you would look for the name. And it was put up by the Comedy Club, a group of Italian-American businessmen.
C-O-M-I-T-Y.
C-O-M-I-T-Y, still in existence. And it was a great honor roll. But like everything else, after the war ended, it had a plexiglass front. And little by little, it just started to disintegrate, and the names would fall off, and nobody was really taking care of it. So finally, there was a group from East Utica said, no, if you're not going to take care of it, tear it down. And finally, they did tear it down. And I believe the names of, I think there were 75 or 80 soldiers of Italian-American descent from Utica killed in action. And I think there's a plaque at the auditorium with their names, but all the other names are gone. As most of the honor rolls, except for, and I give communities like New York Mills and those communities credit, their honor rolls are in bronze, and they'll be there forever, I hope.
Yeah. Do you remember there used to be a bar? I was too young to go in there, but there used to be a bar on Lafayette Street. Was it Lafayette or Columbia? Sheridan's.
Oh, sure. Yeah, Sheridan's on Washington, and just a few feet west of the Olympic Theater.
Yeah, and they had, if I'm correct on the bar, they had pictures of World War II soldiers.
Headshots. The owner, I forget his first name, on Washington Street, just a few doors away from the restaurant, there was a photo shop. And during World War II, a lot of veterans would stop in for a drink, and he would send them, and he would pay for it. He would send them, take your headshot, just a headshot, and the photographer would give it to him eventually, and he put them behind the bar. And it ended up there were hundreds of them. And now they're at the New Hartford American Legion. Or the last time I was there, they were there, and I'm sure there still are. And one of the things we did at the History Center, not the Historical Society, we had an exhibit a few years ago on World War II. Oneida County's participant in World War II. And I forget his name now. But a lot of those photos, the names had been lost. Somehow, it took him a long time. He got most of the names and put them there. And I believe they're there at the New Hartford American Legion now, too. But yeah, World War II was an interesting time growing up in Utica. Yeah,
we got lots of more interesting things to talk about with Frank Tomaino. He's our guest. Short break, right back.